Welcome to Mindful Talk, brief conversations about mindfulness in the workplace and at home. I am your host, Lauren Wessinger.
And I'm your host, Misti Anderson. And this podcast is brought to you by the Mindful Project.
The Mindful Project helps you elevate the culture of your business by bringing mindfulness practice to you and your staff through in-person and virtual learning. Contact us through our website, themindfulproject.co, for more information. The fun conversation of jealousy. Hi, Misti.
Ugh. I'm good. I bet everybody is like, oh, you hear the word jealous, and it just has a lot of really negative connotation to it,
Yeah.
And I know that you've probably been jealous of somebody, right?
Totally.
I've been jealous of people before, and it's like a mind thing. You really have to check it. And for me, I think probably this whole podcast is switching the jealousy to gratefulness. I don't know. That's that's the only way I can flip jealousy. What about you?
Yeah. One thing that helps me flip it or move through it is to realize that it's normal.
Yeah.
Because there's certain feelings like that we feel, we layer the shame on top of the hard feeling, jealousy can feel kind of gross, and it's really, really hard. This is wild. So, the Yoga Sutra from being a yoga teacher. For our listeners, the Yoga Sutra is one of the real seminal old texts on yoga wisdom, yoga philosophy. And in the Yoga Sutra, there is a phrase, or whatever they call it, a sutra, I guess, which means thread, about protecting your mind by working with the idea of being happy for people who have it better than you or are more successful than you. I mean, this text is thousands of years old, which tells me, oh, so this is part of being human, this idea of jealousy.
Yeah.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah, it's not surprising to me. I mean, let me ask you this. When was the last time you felt jealous of someone or their situation or something?
I'm going to be really honest that right before Misti and I started recording, I was sharing with her that I am somehow kicked out of my Instagram app. I post on a third-party platform called Loomly that I love, so I can plan my posts for a couple weeks, and then they post automatically. I can't get into my app. And so I have not been seeing what my colleagues are doing. I have not been seeing people my age that have tighter skin than me and smoother thighs than me. I have not been flooded with that. And so because I kind of work from home, I'm in a very temporary stage where I haven't had a lot of jealous feelings come through. Not because I am enlightened and don't have them. It's only because I'm sort of away from social media right now and working from home. Believe me, they are definitely still there and just waiting to be unleashed.
What a good thing, though. I mean, the power of no social media.
Right.
Well, and that's such a good reference points. What spurs our jealousy? It's seeing what other people have, and social media has built this. Now, granted, I am of the camp that there is a lot of beauty in connection in social media. And I have somehow unlocked a lot of that in my world, but I also think it's a lot of the positivity that I put out. So therefore I receive the positivity back. But it is very easy to scroll and be like, why does she look like that in a swimsuit? Why do they have a big house? Why can't I have that much money? I love her car, and it's really, when you look at all that stuff, and you say it out loud, it's the tangible things. It's the things that don't necessarily matter. And some people, I feel like there's two camps on social media. Some people post because they want the people to be like, oh, you're so skinny. Oh, I love your car. Your house is so big. But then there's people, and I promise this really is me. I genuinely enjoy sharing those aspects of my life. And I like when people connect back and say, oh, I did that, or I'm like that, or I have cellulite like that, or whatever it is. And I think if you are struggling with jealousy, you really need to hone in on who you're following and what you're absorbing, because that is just the seed that plants from social media.
Mm-hmm. For
And
sure.
I feel like when we were moving this summer and our world was so disruptive, and I didn't really even have a house. And, I was visiting my friends along the way who had these very, very stable home lives. Their jobs were stable. They lived in the same place. There was like little tinges of jealousy. And these are people in my life who are like, I love with all my heart, and they're not trying to make me jealous in any way. But that innate human thing was like, I'm missing a home right now and a steady, even keel life. So I'm like jealous of it. And I told one of my girlfriends that while we were traveling, I'm like, I'm really jealous of your just big backyard and your every day that's normal and easy. And she said, well, I'm really jealous of the fact that you have a new adventure and you're recreating the things that you want to happen in your life. She's like, I'm really jealous of that. And I'm like, okay, but do you want to live here, like where you're living? And she's like, yes. And I'm like, so it's so weird how she doesn't really want to change anything about what's going on in her life, but yet she's still jealous of me. And I'm in a way jealous of her. It's so crazy.
I mean, the grass is always greener, whether it's somebody else's marriage, somebody else's body, their job. I mean, the grass is always greener until you get there and it's just not greener. You know what I mean? And it's what you said. It's like, that was a great question to reflect back to your friend. Do you like where you live? Like, do you love living here? Yes. So it's so funny how we can be happy in one place and want it to be different. And I think that's actually the definition of suffering in our mind,
Yeah,
having
right.
something a certain way, even loving it, but wanting it to be different. And it really all comes back to our mindfulness practice. And like you said in the beginning of gratitude for what we have. And I'm just a really big fan of recognizing the human experience in all things. And if somebody tells you they are never jealous, don't believe them. I mean, it's impossible. It's impossible to not have jealousy and envy. It's in every religion. They talk about it in every religious book, from Christianity to Buddhism to Hinduism to Judaism. I mean, it's part of a human mind and living in society. It's just
Yeah.
part of it. When I used to get super jealous, I've thought about this a lot in the past years. The 5 years after my mom died, I used to get so jealous of mother daughters when I would see them out and about. Right.
Me
Yeah.
and my mom, I mean, my mom's not dead, but my mom and I were
Yeah.
in a great place today, but there were years where we weren't. And wouldn't you know, my very best friend in the whole world has like the mom relationship everybody wants. Like her mom is uber supportive. They're great friends. They do fun things together. They talk every day. Man, it would burn inside of me sometimes. The
Yeah.
difference, I think, what kept me from spinning off with that is I always tried to verbalize it to her, mostly because she's my best friend and I knew she wouldn't take it the wrong way. She knew I was happy for that relationship. But at the same time, I'm like, dang, you're so
Yeah.
lucky that you're so close with your mom. And now that me and my mom are closer and we talk, um, it makes me feel like my mindfulness practice kind of got me there, because I was like back in my 20s, especially in dating. Oh my gosh, I used to be the worst jealous girlfriend. And most of the time I checked it, but boy, inside I was going nuts. And I know, I mean, because you're nodding too. I know there's other women and maybe men listening to the podcast who have like that relationship jealousy. And that's really, really, really hard in my opinion. Like, actually, that was probably more hard for me to like get under control than anything. And here I am, married 11 years, and I've been with my husband for 12. And there's not a single person he'd go out and talk to that I would feel jealous of, and it's like that relationship obviously proved itself, and I'm married, so I should relax. But even in the first 2 years, I remember feeling like, gosh, he's too good. I think he probably will figure this out and find somebody else. And I was married. And I know that there are people in married relationships that experience that same kind of jealousy. And so I think the hardest part for me about jealousy is that most of the time it's just in your head. and you're the only person that knows about it. And the only way I've been able to move forward from jealousy is to simply express it. And sometimes it's really embarrassing, to say like, I'm super jealous that you have lunch with your coworker on Wednesday every week, or I'm super jealous that you go running with so-and-so once a week. Whatever it is, it kind of is like the saying out loud dispels it a little bit. And that other person knows that that's kind of like a little thing, a sticking point for you. And then maybe they're a little more respectful of it, or it just opens it up and brings it out. And then you realize how silly it is. And I'm like, I'm super jealous of that person. And I know it sounds ridiculous. But again, back to what you said, it's the human experience. Like I can't change it. I could beat myself up and say, the hamster wheel in my head, Misty, you're jealous. You shouldn't be jealous. That's bad. You're not jealous. Be grateful. And instead, it's like, can I turn that narrative in my head to say, what am I grateful for? Like, I'm really grateful that I can express this to my partner. I'm really glad I can tell my friend that bothers me or that I'm jealous about it. And I feel like for me, that takes a little bit of the fire out of it.
Yeah, I like that. It's that communicating of it is really a vulnerability. And I think because jealousy is a hard emotion, it makes us feel very vulnerable to express it. I remember I used to, during the lockdowns, I would tell my husband when he would come home, I was like, I'm so jealous that you get to go to work all day. And I'm here with the kids 24/7. It was so hard. And just recognizing that we live a quite privileged lifestyle. And so hard is relative. But my truth is that it was hard,
Yeah.
And he would be like, oh my gosh. And he would get really tender and thank me so much for everything I'm doing. And if I didn't express that to him, I wouldn't have received that support back from him,
That's right. And you would have been in your head, just spinning
I
away.
would have been pissed. It would have festered. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I used to have the jealous girlfriend thing big time. And I think part of it is age, I'm more skilled at dealing with hard emotions from years of practice.
Yeah.
But also it was alcohol fueled. I know for a fact that it reared its ugly head when we were drinking too much because we used to drink so much. And everything would get fired up. And then the next day you're like, what was I so worried about?
Oh my gosh. All of ours were alcohol related early on. All of them.
All of it. I mean,
it's like the jealous bug comes out when you drink alcohol.
Oh, God.
And if you see your partner across the wherever, like it was a club and they're like talking to somebody, you're like,
it's so ridiculous.
It's like a monster. I'm very, very thankful that jealousy isn't as deep within me now.
Yeah.
What's crazy is seeing my kids, like little kids experiencing and like your kids getting to the point where they're understanding it. My kids are at the point where like they still don't get it. Like, why can they have this and we can't have this? Or why does their family live this way and we don't live this way? And so I try to tell them like, do you feel jealous? And they're kind of like, well, what does that mean? And I'm like, kind of like, you wish you had that? Yeah, I do. And I'm like, oh man, me too. Me too. I said, and I go back and I tell them this a lot. And this is the real truth. Like a lot of people, I wish we had more money. And I wish that, that was never an issue. I'm not saying I want to be rich or famous or anything like that, but I'd love more money to be able to not have to worry about it. And it is an adult worry. And that's what I tell the kids. I'm like, someday you're going to have to worry about money. And then you're going to see other people that have it, which is like your friends that have the other things you don't. And it's going to make you jealous. And it feels really, really yucky. And I've asked them to verbalize that before. Like, how does it feel when you're feeling like that? And they're like, yeah, I don't like it. And I'm like, I know it's a human feeling like fear or anger that you've got to figure out, what do I do with it? Because it's only in your head and you're the only person that can do something about it. And then I just instruct them and try to teach them about gratitude. And like, let's talk about the things that we do have that a lot of people don't. And that usually, and I always go back to, we have 4 family members that love each other and support each other no matter what. That in and of itself, guys, is like the biggest thing because a lot of people don't have that. So it's flipping the narrative and it's talking through it and it's being honest about the things that are also struggles for me, and that I'm not immune to that either, just because I'm a grown up. I may handle it differently, and I don't shout out how I feel about it like you, because you're 6 and 9, but I feel those same exact, like, oh, why can they have that and I can't? And I think it's really helped them to be able to say, I hear them say more often, like, oh, I'm jealous. And I'm like, and I tell them, good job naming your feeling. And most of the time they roll their eyes at me or they get super annoyed, but I just feel like that repetitive reminding them that it is normal. Because for, I don't know, probably maybe even till I met you, I didn't even know a lot of my emotions were acceptable. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yes.
because I wasn't very mindful. And now that I have a good, solid mindfulness practice and I take care to recognize those feelings, it's okay. Like, I'm pissed, I'm mad, I'm jealous. Like, they're feelings, we all have them, and I'm going to name it. And then once you name it, I don't know, it takes away some of the power of the feeling. Do you think that too?
Yeah, it's like that Dan Siegel. He's a PhD researcher. He says, name it to tame it. So when
Oh,
you recognize and name what you're going through, it lessens its charge. It kind of reduces the charge. I think it's one of the best things about mindfulness practice is that there's no bad feelings. It's the first time in any contemplative, mindfulness is not religious, but even religious practice, where there's no sinning. There's no, that's
yeah.
a bad thing to feel. You're bad for being human. It's more like all of this belongs and all of this is part of your experience. And how can we hold it with more clarity and kindness? I
Yeah.
mean, imagine if the whole world lived by that a credo. I mean, I just think the kindness piece and the acceptance piece is so important to healing so much of what's going on right now.
I think it's fun whenever you express your jealousy to someone, then it's usually like a friend, like, I'm so jealous of this. And then they'll be like, but I'm so jealous of you because of this. It's always somebody,
Yeah.
we all want what we don't have. And it's just in our nature. And even if you have, think about, I mean, I've read tons of books about them, but I don't have any friends that are like super, super loaded. But I know that there are wealthy, wealthy, wealthy individuals that can tangibly have anything they want and they're miserable. And they're jealous of, a simple lifestyle of someone who lives in the mountains and is a librarian. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it doesn't matter what you have, you're still going to be jealous of something because that's the human nature.
Well, there's all that research around at a certain point, money doesn't bring happiness. Like, of course, you need basic needs met and certain things. But the threshold is actually really low. They've done all this like social study research. And at a certain point, more money doesn't mean more happiness. In fact, I think it means less happiness and more complication from what these studies are showing.
I agree.
Um,
You think
I
about
think
famous people, look at, like, I
yeah,
mean, Britney Spears. She's like an example, like, she's got everything or money, and
yeah.
I don't think that she's entirely all that happy and probably jealous of you and I's simple lifestyle.
Yeah, money doesn't mean a healthy inner life by any means. We know that. Um, I think of mindfulness practice too with our jealousy as like the perspective. Mindfulness is also all about seeing reality as it is. And I had the same, like going back to the relationship thing, I definitely had some jealousy in the beginning of my marriage, actually before we were married. And then my husband got like a life-threatening illness. He was sick for a year or so. And all of those feelings went away. Like, I don't have that anymore. After he went through that, I was like, oh my gosh, like that doesn't matter at all.
Right.
And it gave a new perspective to our whole relationship. So I think sometimes too, it's like having something so traumatic happen changes your view, you
I
know?
agree. I agree. When I was growing up, I lived with my grandparents, like from 7th grade on. And me and my mom always, before that, lived really close to my grandparents. And when I moved in with my grandparents, I just carried around for a long time this jealousy of everybody in their normal families. And what's funny is ain't none of those people that I knew normal. And none of them had the quote unquote normal family. But while I was living it, that jealousy, honestly, and this is, I mean, it's a good thing. That jealousy fueled me to create the life that I wanted. Not in a, like, I'm so jealous, I'm going to like work really hard, but like, okay, in my little, 8th grade head, I know, or I think you're supposed to have like 2 parents and, the kid or 2 kids, and you're supposed to all live together. And it's like, as I started to grow, and I mean, and then that's when the divorce rates really picked up, is like whenever I was like in high school and college, I started to see like what I thought was normal wasn't really normal. And that I was really, really grateful that I had people that loved me, that wanted to be there for me and give me like a good childhood, which I did have a great childhood. So it's like, I didn't have a nuclear definition family all the time, but I had love. And so it took me probably until I was 30 years old to get rid of that jealousy. Isn't that crazy? To think, to carry around like a little twinge of like, when things weren't going my way, I would be like, okay, well, you can control this, and you know what the end goal is. You want to have a family and you want to be, on paper, but now I get it. It doesn't, your family is what you make of it. And it doesn't, I don't have to be jealous of other people because I have everything I need. I wish that I could go back and tell my, 8th grade year old self that, because I would imagine there's probably a lot of kids in that position that feel like they're not normal. And that's where that seed of jealousy starts. What you do with that seed is kind of, I think, what brings us the good and bad people. Do you know what I mean? Like, I took that jealousy and I used it in a way to like make the things I wanted to happen in my life. Some people fold into that and they never get through it. And I think that's where your mindfulness practice can help you start to overcome that and start to lean on your gratitude and what you do have. Because when I get, even today, perfect example, when my granddad passed away, my family all kind of just, we've just all kind of gone our separate ways, and we don't get together for like a big Christmas or holiday anymore. So when I see families at Christmas, it is like a trigger. When I see families on Instagram or Christmas, I'm like, why can't I have a family that gets together all at Christmas? And then I'm like, settle, Misty. Like, it's okay. They love you. You love them. Your dynamic is different, and that's okay. Because just because I'm jealous of this family over here that gets together, I don't really know what's going on at their house. That could be like Instagram worthy, and they could all be fighting for all I know. So I think if you have somebody at your house that doesn't feel like their situation is what they want, use that as a way to encourage them to make their own journey and to make their own path how they want it. I wish somebody would have told me that, like, use it as a way. I did it on my own, and thankfully I'm a positive enough person that kind of fuels that. But if you're a negative person and that jealousy seeps in, it can eat you, and it can really bring you down and change the direction that you're going, and which is not what you want, right? And I just feel like it can be a really bad seed, but sometimes jealousy can be a good seed to help you move, like kind of like failure, like we talked about before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. Yeah. It makes me
Well,
think of that Oprah quote, gratitude turns what you have into enough. It's kind of cheesy, but I always remember that quote,
it's so
turns what
true.
you have into enough. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure my kids get sick of me asking them what they're grateful for.
They probably do. And then there's going to be a time when they're adults and they're going to be like, Mom, thank you so much for blah, 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 blah.
I know.
So,
Or just in their head, they'll be somewhere, they'll be in college and they'll be thinking about something. They're like, oh, I'm so jealous because they have so much money and they don't have to worry about paying for college and blah, blah, blah. But you know what? I have a great mom and dad at home that love me, and I'm going to go home and see them at the holidays. And this person doesn't
yeah.
have anybody to go home to at the holidays.
Yeah.
So it's flipping the narrative and really trying. But I think what's most important is expressing it to those that you potentially are jealous of, and it doesn't have to be like, I'm jealous of you. It could be like, I really envy, the way that your family all gets together at Christmas, and I constantly, like I told you about my best friend and her mom, I'm constantly telling her things like that. I constantly am letting her know, like, I really really, really, really envy you and your mother's relationship, but I'm also really glad that you have it because it's such a great example for me and it's what I want. And so that jealousy fuels me forward to do the better. So I hope that if you're dealing with some jealousy, especially relationship, because I feel like that's kind of the nastiest, is like when you're jealous of other men or women that your person might like, that's really difficult. And that is something that you should get out, maybe not tell that person, but like tell a friend, because they maybe can give you a better perspective too. Like there's nothing to be jealous of, or this is all in your head. And when those wheels start on the jealousy train, that's again an opportunity for your mindful practice to keep in, to creep in and say, wait, stop self. We know you're jealous. Let's maybe think about what we're grateful for. That's actually just all I do in my head, just to stop the train, because if not, the train will keep going and then you're just more jealous. Do you have any more tricks that you do to deal with jealousy?
I see it as a little bit of shining a light on a part of me that needs some healing, like in relation to seeing other mom-daughter relationships, or like, it's not a feeling I feel a ton anymore. So I'm trying to think back. I mean, a lot of it for me is like jealousy of maybe colleagues or people in my industry doing better than me. So I take it as a point of healing and reflection, and just, pointing the arrow to what needs a little more love in my inner world, and just seeing it as completely normal,
Yeah.
and I just sit with it and then it passes. It's like you said, that name it to tame it. I'm like, oh, here's this feeling, and I just let it pass through.
With such great words of wisdom. I hope that you guys enjoyed today's episode. We know that some of the topics aren't always fun and not everybody wants to feel these feelings. Like when we talked about failure or we're talking about jealousy, those are things that we don't typically want to admit that we experience. But Lauren and I are here to tell you all experience them, and your mindful practice is what can help you get through those feelings. So we really appreciate you guys today. Thanks, Lauren. And we will be back next week.
Thank you so much for listening to Mindful Talk. We don't take it lightly that you spent your time listening to our podcast, and we are forever grateful. If you'd like to support the podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a rating and a review. Welcome to a more mindful way of living and working.